Welcome to CMMS Radio, a podcast and general resource for all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, from selection to implementation to help you make better choices and have a successful CMMS journey. We'll bring in experts along the way to help us learn more about CMMS, facilities operations, and much more. If you need help with the CMMS project, send a message at cmmsradio.com using the What's on Your Mind link. Suggest a topic, share your CMMS story, or ask questions. We have a really special guest today. This is someone that I know that I just said, I met many, many years ago, and his name is Wickham Zimmerman. He is the CEO of OTL-Inc., and that's outside the lines. And what they do is, I'm going to say, exceptional rock work. They do one-of-a-kind water features and immersive themed environments. And you can see their work all over LinkedIn. If you go and check them out, you'll see all the cool things. I chime in on it sometimes. So if you follow me, you can find that in the feed somewhere, somehow. And I'll put some elements in this episode, but we're going to get into this journey story. And we're mixing in a little bit about maintenance management and maybe CMMS, but what we're really focused on today is operational excellence. And that is what Wick Zimmerman is all about. And this is something I observed years ago, going all the way back to his Valley Crest days. And what was cool for me is I was in the maintenance industry at the time, building maintenance, janitorial, all those types of things. And to see someone that's in this other aspect doing this excellent work and getting occasional information on projects they were working on. I even remember there was an opportunity once for me to get like a whole bunch of king palms if I wanted them. And the place I was staying at the time, we didn't have room for them, but they did all kinds of cool stuff. And then I remember when you launched OTL. So the first thing, Wick, I wanted to talk about is, could you tell us a little bit about how and where this all really started for you? Go back as far as you want, and then bring us up to current times and outside the lines.
Sure. Yeah. So, I've always I'm a serial entrepreneur, I guess. I had my first quote business when I was like, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years old. I had this mutt dog. Her name was Ladybird, after the former president's wife. And she was a cool dog. We were best friends. And I wanted to buy her this blinged out collar that had like rhinestones and ruby. Yeah, it was pretty tacky, but I want to have it. And, my parents were like, if you want that, you need to buy it with your own money. And I'm like, I don't really have any money. And so I was like, how could I get some money? So I came up with this idea. I was going to bake cookies, use my parents, all their ingredients, their oven and everything else. And I was just going to go door to door and sell these things. I had no idea, but once I started doing it, I'm like, well, first of all, you're a little kid, and most people open the door and you got like a thing of cookies. Now today, they probably wouldn't do it because they think
Right.
you're poisoning them. But back in those days, I sold all these cookies. I bought her the collar, and that was kind of the beginning of my entrepreneurial career. So, and like any entrepreneur, there's ups and downs. I've had good ones and bad ones, but the way we really started when I worked for Valley Crest, I was kind of a fixer upper, where I would go around to underperforming divisions and fix them. And so, which I enjoyed, and it was fun. It wasn't terribly financially rewarding because about the time you turned them around to profitability, they'd send you off to do something else. But in that, one of the groups that they had there was called theming, and it came out of a project that they did at in Florida and Animal Kingdom. And it was Valley Crest was a very regimented company. There were procedure manuals for everything you did, and you could go into any branch. And at that time, I think they had 16 branches, and the contract files were set. Everything was exactly the same. Paperwork's process, everything was identical. For whatever reason, these theming guys just did whatever they wanted, and so we had them as a subcontractor on the job because it was water features, rock work, and architectural concrete. And we had them doing some concrete work for us for the Irvine Company. And the Irvine Company has a zero crack policy. Like if your concrete cracks, you're tearing it out, try again. So we had done these walls like 3 times on this project. This is one of these little pocket parks like in Northwood or something,
Mm.
and so I was extremely frustrated with these guys. And the fellow who was president of the company until actually I think January of this year, Tom Donnelly, came in my office one day and he's like, "Hey, these steaming guys are kind of problematic, and all the people that were in the branches, whenever you use them, the requirement was they had to make money. So you had to sometimes take profit out of your job to give it to them, which, as an entrepreneur, that never made sense to me. I mean, that's kind of like government subsidies. Like, wait a minute, what, it should stand on its own or it shouldn't be doing it. So he's like, what do you think I should do with that? And I said, honestly, I'd go over there, I'd throw a hand grenade in the thing, I'd lock the door, and I'd come back the next day and shoot anything that was moving. And he's like, really? It's that bad? And I'm like, it's bad. It wasn't 3 weeks later, I get a call from him and he's like, "Hey, I got a new assignment for you." I'm like, "What's that?" And he's like, "Theming." I'm like, "You're kidding me, right?" And he's like, "No." So I went over there and it was interesting because it's a bunch of really good people, a great business. I knew nothing about the theming business. I mean, I've been in specialty construction. I've been in construction basically my entire working career. Um, but it was very interesting, and it was high profit typically projects. It was finished stuff, so like you'd see your finished product. It wasn't like being a concrete guy where you pour a foundation and you go back to the building and go, "Hey, Greg, check out that foundation. It's really cool, isn't it?" And you're like, "Yeah, man, it's like any other building I've ever seen."
Yeah.
So it was neat that way, but it was kind of like the right people, but most of the right people on the bus, but they were all in the wrong seats. So it was sort of moving them around, and um, it was the toughest kind of turnaround I ever did. But in the process, there's a fellow named Hugh Hughes. That's his real name, and you might have met Hugh along the way. Well, maybe not because yeah, maybe not because I don't think I went over there till I don't know, it was early 2000s. But he was a great guy. Had a big handlebar mustache. Um, when I first met him, he was always in a coat and tie, which was pretty unusual in the construction business back then. And so it was a year and a half process of kind of turning that all around. And I'd get calls from corporate, and they'd be like, "Hey, how's it going down there?" And I'm like, "Have you ever renovated a house while you lived in it? You can relate to this."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "It sucks, doesn't it?" And I'm like, "That's what this is like. Like, I'm trying to get this all fixed, but I'm living with these people. I now know them and are friends with them, and you're trying to get them into the right spot, and it always didn't always work out. So sometimes people had to go away, but so that's how I really got enamored with the business. And then, of course, right about the time we got it turned around, Valley Crest decided they were going to get out of the theming. They took my first advice, except they didn't kill all of us, which was nice. But they like, "Oh, we're going to get out of the business," and so I went back to the landscape um, and site development branch there in Orange County, and Hugh came back. He was still in business development, but he left not too long after that and went to another company that is no longer, but was sort of the preeminent water feature rockwork company. It was a company called Rock and Waterscape Inc. And I had a brief stint there, maybe 5 or 6 months. Hugh and I tried to buy the company, couldn't make that work. So I left, and Hugh stayed. It was a pretty steady paycheck for him. Like, dude, let's just do this on our own. I mean, the one missing thing in all of the theming industry was there were lots of good artisans out there that did fantastic work, but the owners were not business people. They usually came up from the ranks, and they get a big check in and they go buy a motorhome. And then invoices would come in and they couldn't pay the bills, and so it was just never run quite like a business. And when I first got to Rock and Water, and they really had some cash flow issues, not really profitability related, but they would turn in invoices late, incomplete. And so they were always trying to play catch up. And when I would go see clients, the one thing they would always say is, "You guys do incredible work, but you suck at paper." We can't get invoices out of you. We can't get insurance certificates. We can't get all the stuff that we need to do our job because you guys are just incompetent when it comes to that. And that kind of resonated with Hugh and I. And I was like, there's a way to do this and actually run it like a business. Um, it takes discipline, doesn't take a whole lot of brains or talent. It takes more discipline and thought process than anything else. So, I said, let's just do this on our own. And he was like, I don't know, I've got a wife and 2 kids and a mortgage. And I'm like, dude, I'm glad I don't have any of that shit. Like, we all have that, everybody's got that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let's just do it. But he was not at that point an entrepreneur. So I finally drug him kicking and screaming over. And we started out, we had nothing, we had whatever savings we had. Fortunately, I guess for us, it was, we started in 2007, which is probably the worst possible time to start a business. The economy was tanking, and but what worked out well for us was Rock and Waterscape at the same time was beginning to go out of business, and so we were able to cherry pick the best people from there as we got work, and that's really how we got started. And the guys that haven't retired from that are still here to this day. And so that was kind of the beginning of all of it. And it's grown. It's been interesting to watch it grow because, thing about being an entrepreneur, you go into it, you have this great idea, or so you think it's a great idea. And pretty much from the beginning, you're convinced you're going to go out of business. It's just a matter of when that's going to be. So, you're never feeling like you're getting your head above water. And then one day, finally, it clicks, and you're like, you know what? We're going to be okay. We know how to do this, and then you stop focusing on that, and you start focusing on the business and what's really important. And so, that's a longer, short version of how I got to here.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what I'm interested in about all that is this kind of concept of operational excellence, because if you look at the work that you do, and not everybody knows you like I do, right? So I've known you not just in the work environment, but also in the non-work environment. So that gives me a little bit of insight that nobody else has. But there's an approach to this that I think really is it's one of your strong suits as far as I can observe, in that, for anybody that doesn't know, you're a pilot. You have been for quite some time.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
understand the value of, and you could tell when you were explaining about how each of the sites back at Valley Crest had these almost like blueprints and instructions that were systematized, accurate, and really, really worked. But with all these things and some of the other things that you're into and that you're passionate about, you seem to have a strong grasp on how to create, foster, mentor, cultivate this operational excellence. And I want to know, what is it really that you think makes that possible for you to assemble these teams that move incredibly well and produce the highest quality product?
So, it's a mindset. Like it really is either ingrained in you or somewhere along the line you've learned it. And it's, you know, no matter what you do, you want to do your best at it. No matter how small a task it is, how large a task it is, to me, you always put everything you have into that at that moment. And that's the way I live my life. Like if I'm working as hard as I can. If I'm playing as hard as I can. If I'm sleeping as hard as I can. It's like I don't really have a in between speed. And so that's the first thing, is to have the mindset and really truly be committed to it. And people tend to follow the lead, and I think people are much more intuitive than we usually give them credit for. And one of the things I like about the construction business, sort of as an aside, is we deal with people every day from all walks of life, from people that have never graduated from high school to people that have a PhD and everything in between. And that's one thing I love about it, is the people. And you've got to learn how to motivate people of all different backgrounds and characters, and it's not always easy. It's not, the carrot and stick thing if it was only that easy, right? And so it's like, how do you extract the most you can out of each individual? And what I've found is, I think if you walk the walk that you talk, people will tend to, they'll see it and they'll be like, okay, he really means this. And an example is, I always tell the guys, like, are you proud of it? Are you proud of that project? Would you put your signature on that and bring everybody in your family out there and say, I did that? And if there's a millisecond of hesitation, I'm like, it's not good enough. If they're like, absolutely, it's the best thing I've ever done. And I can't tell you how many times, and I've heard on projects like, oh, well, the architect loves it, the owner loves it, they've all approved it. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't like it. It looks horrible. It doesn't look natural. It's not the best we can do. We need to redo it. And then it costs money to do that. But, it's like, because of this business being, you're leaving a finished product, people walk up to it and they see it. And some people don't know. I was at a project a few weeks ago that just, it was horrible. It was supposed to be a naturalistic stream, and there was all this artificial rock in the wrong places. And I'm like, gosh, clearly these people never went out hiking. And like, we've taken our guys out hiking, we've looked at rock formations, we looked at streams and said, hey, the reason a stream turns is there's some hard material, maybe a rock or rock formation. But it goes to where it's softer. So if you have rock on both sides, it's like a drainage ditch. That's not how natural streams work. And if you go out and you see waterfalls, you don't see a waterfall with a perfectly level weir like it's manufactured. There's rock there that broke off, and the water flows, and it's jagged, and it creates cool whitewater effects and all that stuff. So it's like, hey, thinking about what would you see in nature? And so we coined this term, which we ultimately trademarked, called Geo-Believability. And it was like, hey, if you're doing, say, an artificial rock or a natural rock project, it should be material that's indigenous to the area. If you went into uh, Utah and brought in a bunch of lava rock from Hawaii, it might look really cool, and that might be what they want, but it wouldn't look like it belonged in Utah. So it's like, hey, think about what nature would have done and how they would have done it, and our job is to replicate that as closely as we possibly can. So, and I think after a few times of, hey, we're willing to spend money, even though it's been approved by our client or an architect or somebody else, but it's not good enough to meet our standards, then they realize, okay, this is real. This guy's serious, and they all start to have that same feeling. And it's like gluing pipe. I've gone out there, and plumbers are out there, and they're putting primer on the pipe, and it's running down the side of it, and they put the fitting on, and you see all this purple primer, and I'm like, well, it looks like shit. And the guy'd be like, well, it gets buried in the dirt. And I'm like, doesn't matter, right? Somebody comes here and sees what you're doing right now. To me, that looks like me in my backyard doing irrigation fittings. Not Doesn't look like a professional doing plumbing work. And so it's like, hey, everything you do, whether it's buried or not buried, needs to be perfect, or as perfect as it can be. I mean, nobody is perfect, but and I think if you look at things with that critical eye and you push and push, then that becomes a culture, and it truly is, I think, a culture here. Uh, and and yeah, it's why it took me a long time. Not the fastest learner for some things, but when we bring new people in, I can't tell you how many times, especially early in my career, I'd find somebody with a tremendous resume. You'd meet him and you'd be like, not really, this would not be a good friend of mine, but God, they have so much qualifications and experience, and you bring them in, and ultimately it doesn't work because they don't fit in with the rest of the culture. So it's kind of like a splinter. Your body spits out a splinter. A culture of people that actually care and are passionate about what they do, um, are quick to dismiss somebody that doesn't have that same culture. So, we now have Sarah Shores, is our vice president of administration, she is the first person that interviews anybody in this company. And if they don't pass her test, like as a cultural fit, doesn't matter. None of the rest of it matters. Um, so that certainly is another part of it. But and it's kind of goes everything you do. It's not just like the work we do, but it's, hey, we're not going to miss a deadline. We're not going to miss a billing. We're not going to submit a billing on the wrong form. We're going to be good at everything we do, not just the work itself, which was kind of the premise from the very beginning.
What's really important about that whole story to me, aside, I mean, all of it is, but there's this aspect, this element. So it happens in maintenance and reliability, all these different things. You can almost apply that. You can apply this to everything. I think you can when it comes to business, whether you're entrepreneurial or you kind of move past that. And you've got these teams that have to move in a certain way. You you seem to embrace this thing that I've heard termed take a go and see approach. And you mentioned something about when your team, your employees, your team, colleagues, when they see that you are involved and you care, and it's not just, hey, let's chase down the money, but let's be in constant pursuit of excellence, because that's how you get closer and closer to perfect. You won't hit perfect, but you'll get the feelings. And when people see that, I know I've loved it in every work environment when my boss, my colleagues, whoever is actually taking not just an interest, but they're offering some guidance and observation. And at the same time, it sounds like you're set up in a way to allow people to do what they do. Of course, if they can
100%.
get
Yeah.
in, but once they've got the job, you set them up for success, as opposed to these common situations where it's like, just do the job and you're not getting any insights. And I want to ask you now, how critically important is the why to everyone within building a culture like this? Like, do you have to kind of bridge a gap between leadership's why versus frontline workforce why? How does that all kind of play a role?
Yeah, that's a good point, and it is critical because everybody has to be on the same page. I mean, construction is typically very sort of class oriented. Like you got on a job site, you see different color hard hats, right? Like that's sort of the class system, and it's the office and the field. Like they're two different people, and I've always taken the position that those of us in the office, we only exist to support the guys in the field who are actually doing the work. It's not, we wouldn't be here if they weren't there. So, if there's somebody in admin that's like, oh, yeah, the guy's late turning in his time cards, like, hey, well, he's pouring concrete today. It's 105 degrees outside. Um, Maybe give him till the end of the day to get his daily reports turned in. And it's that attitude of like, oh well, they're just field guys. They just don't really care. I'm like, it's not that. It's like they care about the number one job, which is keeping you in a job and me in a job. And so there's that, and to bridge the gap between the field and various levels within the organization. And I learned early in my career that a lot of times it's the people actually doing the work that can teach you the most. Take you back to my days of doing concrete work, concrete repair stuff, and we had 20 guys on a job, and it was very much production work. It was square footage. It was quality had to be there because it was structural, but you knew how many square feet of whatever activity you should get done in a day, and we were constantly trying to figure out how to do better. One of the guys who was a laborer came up to me one day. He's like, "Hey, I have an idea." And I'm like, "Well, what is it?" And he's like, if we paid one guy to come in early, an hour early, and uncoil all the hoses, start the air compressor, put the chipping guns on, and have everything ready so when the other 19 guys get here, they're productive from the very get go. And at the end of the day, uh, we have somebody stay over an hour and do that exact same thing. And it was like, oh, what a revelation, because like, oh, well, you don't want to spend an hour of any overtime, right? But at the same time, it's like, hey, you guys can't leave this stuff out there. Not good. The tools have to be oiled. And again, if somebody were to come out on the job and see it in progress and be like, there's air hoses everywhere. It looks like these guys just up and left. That's not very professional. But it was a complete revelation. Another guy came to me one day. He's like, we have these chipping hammers that we can't fix them in the field and they break all the time. So we have twice as many as we need. There's this model that is field repairable. It costs twice as much, but it's field repairable. And, we looked at it and said, wow, that's brilliant. It actually saves time, but I would never know that sitting in the office because I'm not doing it all day, every day. So it's part of it is making everybody feel like they have a voice, but not only make them feel like they have a voice, but give them an actual voice. And it's not like everything they say you're going to be like, oh yeah, I'll run out and do that. But you listen to it, you discuss it with them, and they understand that you're actually listening to them and taking their opinion seriously. And a lot of them have never experienced that before. They've always been in those positions like, look, I'm going to tell you how to do this and just do it, even if you know it's wrong. You do what I tell you and don't think. I'm not paying you to think. I'm paying you to pour concrete or carve rock or whatever the case is. And I think if you approach it like that, that's what you're going to get.
This is pretty incredible because with what you said, the first thing you were talking about, where someone that's on that front line doing a lot of kind of laborious, monotonous, hard work is bringing you this idea. And it's not only that you considered it, but what he was describing and what you were talking about there in the big bad world of maintenance, or even production, we call that typically full kitting or kitting, where everything's ready to go, and that adds so much more efficiency. And too many organizations might look at, or leaders like yourself might look at that extra hour on the front and the back end as problematic, when in fact it increases your productivity, efficiency. The guys that show up at start time, they're ready to rock and roll. They can knock off that last sip of coffee and get busy. So that's great. And then the other thing is, this is kind of, I'm trying to kind of spin it a little bit, but it's not a spin at all, actually. When you take that feedback, whether you do something with it or not, like, you do at least something with it. And what we see in the world of CMMS, so that's computerized maintenance management software, it could be any technology that you leverage within these types of environments, construction, production, anything like this. When teams, people have to utilize and leverage those pieces of technology, and they see that you're not using it, they don't like that and they will disengage. Whereas with what you're talking about, there's actual that closed loop of, you keep me aware, I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to do something with it, or not, but I'm not going to leave you hanging. So we're all engaged. We're all kind of bought into, hey, we're going in this direction. Hey, I'm in an environment where it's okay to use this technology, or tell my boss, because he's going to tell his boss that I observed something that may or may not help us. All of that is critical to the overall culture. And now you're setting yourself up for continual process improvement. No?
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. And the only way you really get that is you do have to go out into the field and see what's happening and talk to the guys and experience the frustrations they have. And I always like to ask the guy, whether it's a guy with a shovel or the superintendent, whoever is out there, hey, what frustrates you every day? What makes you anxious about what we do? What would, if you could do something different, what would you do? And it's pretty amazing, the ideas that come back. And sometimes, like I say, it's not really any great revolution, but it's like, oh, you care about me being out here. I didn't think anybody cared about me being out here. I'm going to work that much harder because I now see how you feel about it and how you approach it. And so, you kind of create that environment of like, hey, we care about each other. We care about what we do. And there's always some way we can improve, right? The second you sit back on your laurels and say, hey, we're the best, and it's nice to say, hey, we're the best in our industry. I mean, we're in a small industry, so it's not hard to say that. But as soon as you say that, somebody's passing you by. If you don't think all your competitors are nipping at your heels, looking at what you're doing and trying to figure out how to do it and do it better, you're kidding yourself. And so you've got to have that sort of attitude of like, hey, we've always got to do something better than we did before. How do we do that? Whether it's technology, like our R&D tech folks, or whether it's something like carving rock, like how do we get this material to the guys up there that are doing the carving or doing the painting that much easier, to make their jobs easier and more efficient. And there's always ways for it. Construction is inherently inefficient. Contractors are notorious for being the last ones to take on any technology. I mean, I was at a conference 2 years ago for the software that we use for our accounting,
Hmm.
and we've been doing a bunch of data analytics for a while, and I was there doing a presentation on data analytics and what you could do, and not focused on looking backwards because that's nice, but what can you do with the data you have and look forward? Like where are you going based on where you've been? And while we were between sessions, I went into this one room where they were talking about job costing with his software, and there was probably, I don't know, 200 people in this room, and mostly contractors. And the guy who's leading the class says, "How many of you guys use job costing?" And I was shocked to see like maybe half the room raise their hands. I'm like, "What? How?" I couldn't sleep at night if you had no idea what you were spending. And then there were the guys that were like, "Well, we have one cost code, and that's it. We don't try to break down our costs by activity. Um, we just don't do that." And to me, I'm like, well, you're missing out on a whole lot of valuable information that you could do something with. But that's just the way contractors are. There's still contractors out there that have a bookkeeper with a ledger and a pencil. I guarantee you, there's probably hundreds of them that aren't even using any software at all because that's what they've always done and it's always worked for them, and they're successful in their mind, and they're happy with where they are, and change is painful for everybody, so it's like, hey, let's just go with it.
That change being painful is so common, and I'll be in these situations over the last, I don't know, 20 plus years, helping people manage and implement that change and become successful. Yet as often as I've been able to do that, even me myself, highly resistant to those changes, because what really happens is there's vulnerability in change,
Yep.
and true success lies in the risk. I'm not talking about risk that, like, risks your life or something like that, but
Right.
the change and the risk and walking into that vulnerability or being that vulnerable really magnifies or improves the likelihood that change is going to have a positive impact. But it can be really scary. This reminds me of the status quo. Well, we've always done it that way,
Yep.
and it's like, yeah, that's comfort, and that gets back to what you were talking about. Something popped into my head when you were talking about this. Um, there was a phrase many years ago that I think I was talking to Sean about it or something, but I'm wondering if this didn't maybe even come from you, or maybe you've heard it. Once you think you've got it all, that's when you're going to start to lose it all.
Yep.
And this
Absolutely.
whole thing, it's the same with things like change management. And you have to take a moment and you have to use whatever data you have available. If it's on paper, it's on paper, and you have to assess, is there an opportunity here that actually improves not just our top and bottom line, but the quality of how we move forward? I mean, that resistance is a clue to an opportunity with those individuals that are in fact resistant. No?
Absolutely. And when I was doing the turnaround stuff, if I had $1 for every time somebody told me, "Hey, we've done it this way for 20 years," I'd be like, "Stop right there. I don't even know what you're talking about, but it's wrong. If you've been doing it the same way for 20 years, it's wrong. There's a better way to do it." And it's like, whenever you get to that point, I know if I'm sitting here and I feel comfortable, that makes me uncomfortable because I'm like, okay, what am I missing? There's something happening that I'm not seeing or I'm not addressing. It's like the discomfort of change and pushing yourself, and you're not, you are going to have failures. You are going to make missteps. It's just a fact of life. And so if you focus on that and that's all you think about and you want to avoid it, you can do that, but you're going to hold yourself back. It's like you can always push a little bit harder. And that's where I think the culture comes in, right? You mentioned vulnerability. And we all do feel vulnerable when there's a change. Like, oh, I don't know, maybe this might take my job away. Okay,
Yeah.
well, maybe it does. Maybe it takes that job away, but that doesn't mean you're going away. So now you're going to be doing a new job, something that's more valuable, more important. But you have to be in a culture where you feel it feels okay to be vulnerable. Say, look, this I'm worried about this. This isn't going to be easy, and not and in construction that's tough because everybody's macho men. Like
Yeah.
it's everybody's a Superman, and you got to break past that and get to the real human core and be like, hey man, uh, here's something I think it's maybe crazy, but you got to be willing for them to go, man, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Be like, okay, well, I wasn't really sure, but I'm glad that you told me what you really think about it. But if you don't do that and you're always holding back, then you're never going to get forward, right? And
Yeah.
if you don't continuously try to make improvements, no matter how small they are, and that's the other thing is people will look at let's make some massive improvement. And that's great if you can do it. But sometimes that takes a long time. And then it's easy to get burned out along the way and you lose focus and the economy changes and your whole life changes. And then it's like, not really that. I'm not into that anymore. Whereas if you break it down into bite sized pieces and you have these little successes, just little successes, it's like, oh, that's cool. And it sparks you on, to the next thing and then you kind of have these multiple little successes and eventually it becomes a big success, but it's easier to have a lot of little successes than one big success. And same thing, if you have a failure, it's certainly much better to have um, smaller failures than big ones.
Yeah.
It's like I always tell the guys, I'm like, look, I I don't like to be micromanaged. I never have. I've always wanted to work for somebody that said, "Here's the job. Here's what I expect out of you. Here are the goals. Here's our plan. Go do it." And how you do it, how you get it done, doesn't matter to me. So that's kind of been the way I've approached things. And it's like, some people are uncomfortable with that. They want you to tell them. Other people thrive that way, and they come up with ways to do it that I would have never thought of. And so it's like, I'm like, look, don't make the same mistake twice. That really pisses me off because that means you didn't learn from the first one, right? And the second one is try not to make any really big mistakes. You know, little mistakes are okay, but try not to make any mistakes that are going to like knock us off the rails. And kind of tongue in cheek, but at the same time, it's true. And if you give people leeway like that, you're going to find out what they're made of. And a lot of times the people that you don't think have it in them, but you give them that leash, you find out that they've actually got more of it than you do. And that
That's
they're starting to push you.
Well, that's what we ultimately want if we want a truly thriving organization. When I talk about that, I mean it's 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 a bit righteous, but I'm talking about like when it all starts to hit, when you're firing on all eight cylinders, as just using that as an analogy, and you're not only really getting somewhere, you've got the wherewithal to handle the problems that are going to happen, because problems are going to happen, mistakes are going to be made. But if you have this culture and people know, all right, this is an environment where I can ask my boss, talk to my supervisor about something, you know, within a reasonable way, right? You're not in there,
Yeah.
dropping F bombs and, crushing somebody.
Well, it
But
is construction, so
yeah, yeah, but don't throw the hammer. Just,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really about creating that environment, because this business overall is a team sport.
100%.
It is a team sport. Not too many people got very far all by themselves. And the reason I say that is, if there's three things that you do that become six, that become, 18, you ain't getting there. And you need people that are willing to, you got to give some people opportunity, create, maybe take a little bit of a chance on somebody, great potential, great personality. They understand these 3 things. We got to help them on these 2. We're going to give them 90 days to start picking that up. And man, all of a sudden you got someone that's going to be with you for 10 years and they're going to help the person on their right or their left.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's what teams really do. I'm not saying it's easy. Oh, hey, go team, and
No,
everybody's
it's
happy and hunky dory. But
if it's easy, everybody be doing it, right?
of course, and
That's
that's the other thing. I tell people all the time. I mean, you want to do something, you want to try something. You're not that experienced. I mean, it's okay. Just calculate your risk a little bit. Don't
right.
bet the house.
Right.
Get out there and swim around. And when you get stuck in any way, shape, or form, I think mentorship is a good way to kind of find some mentors that can be a sounding board, give you some guidance. And I think you're kind of all about that. I want to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I want to be mindful of your time. I know we pigeonholed this one in, but
Yeah, no
there's a
worries.
bunch of cool stuff I want people to know, not just about Outside the Lines, but also about you. So, if that's okay,
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
you do some what I think is incredible work from a philanthropic perspective, and I wanted to ask just a little bit about that instead of trying to call it out myself. Could you tell me about a couple of the things that you're involved in that you're so passionate about that you want people to know about?
Sure. So, well, animals are near and dear to my heart, and I'll talk about that one in a minute. But I just this morning had a meeting with a group here in Orange County called 100 Companies That Care, and we were a founding member of it. I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. It's a couple young guys put it together, and the idea was um, all charities in Orange County, and it was a concept that was really pretty cool and something I'd never thought of, which was bring a whole bunch of people together so nobody has to shell out a lot of money to make a difference. It's like a combination of little amounts add up to a big amount. And so that's the concept of 100 companies. Everybody puts in the same amount every year, and it's like $4,000. So it's not a life changer, but you get 100 companies, that's $400,000. And it's really cool the way they do it is like there's 3 charities that come and do presentations. We meet once a quarter. Today was our meeting for this quarter. And each of the charities does a presentation and then we vote on it. And the winning charity gets 80% of the pot. So today it was $40,000 we gave away. And the other 2 get 10% each. So there's no real losers. Um, but it's kind of cool because I've learned more about charitable organizations in Orange. I never knew there were so many and so many different causes. And that was one today that really kind of touched me because it started by a couple that lost their daughter to this brain tumor, which I'd never heard of before, and that gave them this passion to start this charity to raise money, and it's still not curable, but they've now got these kids that have as a tumor. I guess it grows around the brain stem, so it's inoperable, and they're still doing quite a bit of research, but they have now gotten to the point where when their daughter passed, I think she had maybe 6 months from the day she was diagnosed to the day she passed, and now they have some that are 3 years. They have one kid that's actually going to college. Nobody survived yet, but it's really cool, and I'm like, wow. And they dedicated their life to it, and so that's kind of cool. And I'm very passionate about that, and we've helped. It's a community, so no matter how big or small your company is, everybody puts in 4,300. There's $300 extra we kick in, so we have coffee when we have these meetings in the meeting room and all that stuff. Um, so that's really cool, and like I say, it's a lot. There's the requirements, and we all nominate charities to be part of it. But the only requirement for the charities have got to be a 501c3. They have to either be based in Orange County or have a significant presence in Orange County. And that's pretty much it. And then, they do a presentation. And what's really cool about it is we've seen charities that start working together because they came together in their presentation. They never didn't know they each other existed. And one's like, hey, wait, I could help you and you could help me if we just kind of met online and collaborated. And so Now the last piece of the meeting is whoever won last time comes in and they tell us the impact that they had as a result of the donation that we made. And so that's a cool group. There's one Tire San Jose, which is now Hope Builders. I got involved in that when I was at Valley Crest, and it was one of those kinds I was voluntold for it. But I became enamored with the group and the concept, and it's based here in Santa Ana, and they're all kids that are high risk. They may have been in jail or on drugs or in a poor family situation, and they bring them in. They give them skills. Initially started with construction, and they would go through this program to learn a skill set, and then they would get placed with a company. Of course, a lot of the companies that supported this group were construction companies. So we'd be like, hey, yeah, I would gladly hire this person, because they're people with a ton of grit. They just haven't had the opportunity. Nobody's given them an opportunity. There's no way to break the cycle. It's like there's so much to be said about. I was blessed to come from a good background, and I credit a lot of what I have today to that, because you look at some of these kids and they're stuck, and how do you get out? You don't have the opportunity to go get a job, and some of them are like, hey, they're staying at home. They quit school to help a parent that's ill, and they don't have a job. And if you look at them not knowing the background, you might say, well, you're lazy, you're playing on your iPad all day or whatever. And it's not a case of that at all. It's like just never had the ability or the time, the opportunity to go do something. And so I love that group, and they've got an incredible success rate. And now they're doing things like medical technicians, administrative positions. They've really expanded and grown. And what's cool about that is when each year, after you donate, you get a card, a handwritten card from one of these kids who's telling you what an impact your donation had on their life. And it's pretty touching. And it's one kid, right? So you're not saving the world. And sometimes, and this is where the animal thing comes in, is, I've always loved animals. Actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a veterinarian. That was my passion. And when I got to college, after like 6 months, of course, I went to all boys high school. And so we were around girls, but never at school with girls. So I get to college, I discovered that girls, rugby, and beer. And then, oh yeah, there was school. And so after the first semester, my advisor was like, you should probably think of something else to do, because getting into vet school is harder than getting into medical school. And you're not actually going to get into any kind of school unless you get your act together and start studying. And I kind of regret this in a way, not really regret it, but if I was doing it over again, I probably would approach it differently, in that I always looked at school as do what you have to do to get by, but there's a lot of other stuff that you could have fun, and sort of, I think in some ways helps you have a more rounded life.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's the story that I'll stick to now. And, so it became something, well, that's just not happening. And then, I became a math major, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? I guess I could teach math. And I'm like, I don't want to be a teacher. And then I was like, well, I could be an engineer. And so that's how I got into engineering uh, and all. But, always had this passion for animals. And, we've had rescued dogs and ones with different afflictions. And I think it was Allie that actually got me involved in Pilots and Paws probably almost 20 years ago now. And that's a group where we fly animals that are usually going to their forever home. Sometimes a foster, they're in a high kill shelter, and their D-Day is up, and they, rescue pulls them, and they found somebody to place them with all the way across the country. It's actually pretty incredible to watch, because there are some of these coordinators that I've become pretty close with over the years, and it's like a military exercise. I mean, there are, in some cases, like 20, 30 legs of transporting an animal from point A to point B. And I would get frustrated with, you get one person, it's like, I can't do this leg, and everybody else is lined up, and the whole trip is off unless you find somebody to do that leg. Um, so, that would be tough. But I've done a lot of that, pilots and paws and flying animals, and it's funny because I really think they know that they're on their freedom journey. And I just had some 3 weeks ago. I guess I flew up to Boise. There's a great group in Boise called Boise Bully Breed Rescue, and they take a lot of the pit bulls that here in Orange County, the shelter, and this is the case in Palm Springs and a lot of areas. The pit bulls are sometimes tough to place. They've got a bad reputation, which is totally undeserved. I mean, they are some of the smartest dogs and most loyal and kind dogs. Like any animal, they could be made mean if you're mean to it, but they started out being the nanny dog. That's how they were known in England way back in the day. That the people hired that or got them, and they watched over the kid and kept the kid safe. But anyways, and the problem with them being in these shelters is after 30 days, sometimes less, they start to get that the shelter depression. Like they're intuitive animals. Most animals really are more intuitive than we give them credit for. And they get depressed, and it's like they're never going to get out. They know what death smells like. They smell it every day. Their next door neighbor heads off and never comes back. They know what's happening. And then, with that particular breed, it comes time for their checkout of sociability. And it's like now they're withdrawn. They don't know, am I getting pulled out because I'm going to be put to death, or is somebody going to come and get me? And so it's tragic. But those guys up there are great. And one of the dogs I took up there, they actually brought this batch in the actual animal control vehicle, which was first that's happened to me. Normally it's either somebody in a private vehicle that's volunteered in driving, or last time they brought four of them. I flew up to Boise. They brought them in a van, but the guy was like, "Oh, this one is he's not really good. He's like, we need to wrap his muzzle and get him in the crate, and in the airplanes, especially these bigger dogs, I have to get the crate in, get the crate set up, and then get the dog in the crate. There's no way you could get a big dog in a big crate and get it through the door and all that. And so I was like, well, let's let him out for a little bit. Let's let him kind of get used to um, completely new surroundings. That dog turned out to be the sweetest thing ever. He had some things he needed to learn, like he was a jumper,
Mhm.
but he was anything but scary, mean, going to bite somebody. It was just he wasn't. He was scared. He had no idea where he was, and so it's very rewarding to me to do that. And um, it can be it wears you out sometimes. I mean, I probably gotten 4 emails today with dogs that have been abused, and they're trying to raise money for them. And you look at the pictures and you're like, God, how could anybody do that to an animal? And it's like you just feel so badly for them. And there's just so many of them that you're like, man, I saved 4 dogs this month. That's a drop in the bucket. There's hundreds of thousands of them. But it's like anything else. If you look at it like that, then you talk yourself out of it, or you're like, oh, I can't make a difference anyway. So what difference does it make? But if you got 100 people saving 4 dogs a month, that's 400 dogs, and you get 1,000 people, and it's just it every little bit helps. And I've met some really cool people. I mean, I don't know, dog people. Some of them are weird, but they're really good people. And so it's been something that I enjoy. I'm passionate about it, and I love to fly, so I don't need
Yeah.
much of an excuse to go flying. And you know, I don't know. I usually have at least one of them loose in the airplane, and they almost always will jump up in the co-pilot seat and sit there, the whole trip, and they're like, "Yeah, this is pretty awesome."
Yeah, I can only imagine that. I think years and years ago, I think I was talking to you about the flying, and you would fly to these different places, and I was like, oh man, I don't know if I could handle a plane ride like that, because they're not quite as fast as as a big full blown jet, and even Al used to tell me about it. like for her it's fine, and I'm like, oh, I don't think I could do it, man. It's and I like talking about this stuff and bringing it up on the podcast episodes, because it gives people an opportunity not just to know you and how you approach operations and all that stuff, but some of the things that you really care about. And if they're paying attention, and maybe even if they're not, they'll realize that it's all really connected,
Yeah,
and it's this way of being. And I'm not telling everybody out there, yeah, go out and save a dog today, but if you're into dogs and you want to make a difference, you can go save a dog. You can go down to your local pound and find one that's
absolutely.
cool enough to adopt and do a little bit of fostering. But Pilots and Paws, you'll notice I try, if I see it hit my feed, I will get on there and say a little
Yep,
something, because
you do.
I think it's cool. I think it's I'm a dog guy. I think dogs are way better than people. And
Absolutely.
you'd be pretty hard pressed to move me off that opinion. And I'm not saying people are terrible or bad. I'm just saying dogs are like the best. Like
They
the
are.
best.
I
Uh,
always say, if more people were like dogs, the world would be a better place.
oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. And what goes along with that is there'd be some things getting worked out
Yeah.
real quick, real quick, and that's
Yeah,
because
there
that's how
would.
puppy politics works. They go to the post and then they become friends. It's weird.
Yeah, right.
Um, I wanted to ask you about something related back to, kind of like business operations and outlook on business. Are there any trends happening right now that concern you? And what I'm really dancing around here is the skilled trades gap, or maybe even supply chain type issues. Anything else like that is a concern right now?
Yeah, I mean, the supply chain thing, wasn't a huge deal until after COVID, and then anything that had a circuit board in it became hard to get and long lead. That's eased up a little bit. I mean, we see it every now and then, but that's it's an ongoing concern, but it's not a major concern. The major concern is what you touched on, which is the labor shortage. And
Yeah,
it's, people are not going into the trades. And it's like, hey, I can go to McDonald's and make $20 an hour, with flipping burgers or pulling fries. You want to pay me $25 an hour to dig a trench in the hot sun or the rain, and it's tough physical labor, and so it, that's very concerning, and it's concerning from the standpoint of a few things. One, obviously, there's a lot uh, of us are getting older, and when you do work in the field, it's hard on your body. So you can't work till you're 65. When you're in your 50s, if you're not supervising other folks, you're done. Your body's shot. You can't take anymore. And then there's not a long line of people to fill those voids. And if it were manufacturing and you say, well, let's get a robot to do it, that would be great. But again, we're in construction. It's the last one to adopt any technology, and I'm sure there will ultimately be robots to do some of what is done in construction, and there is stuff out there now. Certainly, some of the machines have become much more automated, but that's a huge concern, and I don't know the answer to it really. I mean, what we've tried to do is we have a number of our long term employees who are bringing in their kids who didn't go to college and aren't lazy and want to work hard. That's been a good source for us, but you talk to the unions or anybody out there now, and they're like, we got nobody on the bench. There's nobody um, waiting around to do this. And back in the day, 50s, 60s, 70s, it was a good, you could make a good living in construction, and you still can. It is hard work. And if you get with the right company, we've got guys that make a ton of money, and they provide for their families. We have a non-optional retirement plan that the company funds for all of our guys. So we force them into a retirement plan so that it can be a good, comfortable living, but it's just not seen that way in general, and uh, it's unfortunate. I don't know the answer to it, but it's going to be a problem, and it's going to continue to get worse. I mean, we've all in this industry been worried about it for 10 years. And now more and more and more people are seeing, hey, this is going to be a huge issue at some point in time.
it's a it's a It's a big deal. I talk about it a lot. I talk about it on almost every single episode because not just because it's a problem, but also because all of us are not quite sure what the answer is. We know that talking about it, shouting about it, so to speak, from the mountaintops will make some kind of an impact. And then we hope somebody somewhere out there, even one person that hears this episode, says, you know what, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. I am kind of a fan of not just doing that, but I like seeing these different organizations that are promoting the skilled trades, whether it's construction, maintenance related
Yep.
things, welding, sheet metal, on and on like this. There's different scholar programs. And one thing I've noticed, and I talk about it on a lot of my episodes, when I went to high school, which was in the 80s, we had shop class
Yep.
for auto shop, we had wood shop, we had metal shop, we had drafting, we had, and the list goes on. And I now see in the last 10 plus, for sure 20 years, less and less and less of that, less promotion around and talking about the skilled trades. People think, oh, jobs, you get dirt under your nails and all that. When in fact, people that go into the trades tend to be extremely satisfied with their work days. They tend to have really good earning because, an HVAC or otherwise, they actually make great money. And
Yeah.
it's going to be okay in construction as well. I mean, I know you got to compete with Mickey D's and all that, but there are a lot of different levels within each of these industries. So I think we just need to keep talking about it. And I wanted to ask you because not only have you been there and done that, you see it all the time. And we're also in a state, and we're talking about, like Orange County in particular. There's a lot of pressure coming in around these types of operations. And it's pretty scary. So I'm not saying we're going to resolve it, but it's an important thing we need to keep talking about and try to figure it out.
Absolutely. And and school's a great place to start because the other thing that people don't think about is with not having shop. I one day a week now I work on cars. I've been a shade tree mechanic for 50 years, and
Mhm.
I'm not trained, but I enjoy doing it. I enjoy getting dirty and turning wrenches and figuring out problems and all. But and it's like you have the ability to do stuff around your house, like redo your bathroom. There's so many people that have no idea where to start because they haven't had any kind of shop or technical training. And that's the thing is like, hey, even if you don't go into the trades, but one day you want to be able to fix your washing machine or drywall a room or whatever, you've got the ability to do that. And you don't have to go hire somebody. And there's a lot of satisfaction out of being able to do some of that stuff yourself.
Mhm. For sure. For sure. And so um I was about to move us into the fun question segment. So I think with some of the stuff you were talking about right there, this is going to be really good timing. And so we're just going to roll right into it. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Number one off the top. What is your favorite music?
Wow. You know, I like pretty much all kinds of music. I'm not a huge country fan, although some country I actually do enjoy, but I would say lately anyway, it's sort of the alternative music. A lot of this DJ stuff that's mixes and everything. And yeah, there's a station called And Him I have on Pandora, and I listen to it every Friday when I'm working on cars. And Allie comes in the garage and she's like, "What the hell? It sounds like a club in here." And I'm like, "This is great motivation, though. Like it gets you moving. It's like, hey, there's some song about it." Chicken and a crow and eating a crow or something. I'm like, it's funny as hell, but I don't know. That's probably my current favorite. But I certainly I grew up in the '60s and '70s, so I love the old stuff. I just took Allie a couple of Fridays ago to see War
Ah,
live, and it was awesome. I mean, those guys uh, when they started in 1969, some of the first music I remember, and it was amazing to actually go see them perform and all that. So I like a whole lot of different stuff.
yeah. Yeah. And again, there's no wrong answers on any of this stuff. It's fun stuff. It's interesting stuff, and get somebody to think, oh yeah, I like war, or whatever. Next one is, what is your favorite sport or hobby? You can answer both if you want to. And on the sport, it does not have to be one that you play. It could be one that you just like to watch, observe, and participate in some other way.
Gotcha. I have to say my favorite sport is rugby. Hockey's a close second. I didn't play rugby till I went to college. I played hockey throughout grade school, high school. But what I loved about rugby is the epitome of team sports, right? You got to know where everybody else is. You have to pass backwards, and there's no fair catch. So you can retrieve your own kickoff. So when you're back there and you hear 15 footsteps coming your way, and you're getting ready to catch a ball and get snockered, that's pretty cool. But the first year I played, we really sucked, and by the fourth year, we were really good because it's like you knew everybody's strengths and weaknesses. Like they're like, hey, Zimmerman's not going to run all the way up the field and all the way back, but he's going to be consistently somewhere in between, and so like this guy's always going to be there or he's never going to be there. So that's probably my favorite sport. I like watching hockey too. Took Allie to a couple of the minor league games, and when the Ice Dogs were in Long Beach, we'd go up there, and she'd of course have a conniption when they get in a fight, and she's like, why don't they stop the fight? I'm like, don't stop the fight till there's blood on the ice. I mean, that's why everybody's coming here. They're not coming here to watch hockey. They come here to watch the fights.
Yeah.
But and hobbies, love flying. Always had a fascination with it. For me, it's been a release. Like I get in the airplane and it has its own level of stress. There's no doubt about it. And I'm flying a jet now, so it's actually easier to fly, but you can never be anywhere where your brain hasn't been at least 10 minutes before, because everything's happening faster. Controllers expect more out of you. They expect you to be a professional pilot. They don't expect you to be some dumbass that doesn't know what's happening. But because you're so focused on that, when you get out, it's like, all the other problems in your life, whether it's work, home, whatever, go away for that hour, 2 hours that you're flying. And it's always been that way for me. And so, there's times that certainly if I have a long day, I may not fly back that day, but there are times when I've had a long day, I jump in the airplane and fly home, and then get home and I'm like, I feel great. I feel like I put everything, all the stress of the day out, flew the airplane, and so that's probably one of my favorite hobbies. And I love cars, and I love anything that goes fast,
Yeah.
so, and I like working on cars, and can never make a living at it, but it's a good hobby. It's frustrating sometimes. There's something that went around Instagram not long ago, and it's like what most people think of classic cars, and they have like, these two cars cruising down the PCH, and these good looking girls leaning all over them. And they're like, what it's really like. And there's this guy underneath his car with he's welding and he's banging stuff and he's cussing at his car. And I'm like, that couldn't be more correct.
Yeah. Yeah. But cars are awesome.
They are.
Definitely. Now, the really big of the fun question segment questions is, what is your philosophy, perspective, opinion, or approach to work-life balance?
Hey, this is one of those things where it's probably, I'm probably better do what I say than what I do. Like I say, I've always thrown myself into whatever I'm doing. And so, that's not always the right thing to do. There is a balance, and you do need to have that balance. What I think is important, and this is harder to do today, like early in my career, before we had even cell phones, much less text and email. And now people pretty much expect you to respond, if not the same day, within a few hours, even on the weekends. You never really get disconnected. And that takes some discipline, but I think it's important that, when you go home, when you're done, put your phone away and, enjoy whatever it is at home, whether it's, your family or your hobby or just relaxing. You do have, your body has to recharge. There is no doubt that you can't go 100% all the time. but I'm kind of a workaholic, and that's not really a good thing. It used to be in my day growing up in the industry, that's how you got ahead, right? You stayed later, you got there earlier, and that's somebody would notice that eventually, and you worked harder, and then that got you to the next level. I will say, as much as some people complain about millennials and Gen Zers, they do get the work life balance piece. Um, that, hey, I'll give you my all for 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever. But when I'm off, I'm off. Don't call me, don't text me, don't email me. I'm not going to respond. And that can be frustrating at times, but it also is understandable. And I think it is important because how many people do you know that they work really, really hard, they retired and died? And the whole reason we're working is obviously we're getting some fulfillment out of it, but is to ultimately be able to retire and do things you enjoy. So it'd be a shame to get to the point where you have abused your body and your health and everything, and then you don't get to do what you enjoy. So I do think it's important. I'm probably one of the worst ones at doing it, but like I say, whatever I'm doing, I am doing it 100%. So if I'm working on cars on Friday, people know don't call me unless it's emergency. Then it better be an emergency. And sometimes it's good timing because like I'm super frustrated. I'm like I need to walk away from this thing before I throw a wrench. Other times it's like I can't do it right now, but yeah, I think it is important, and it's how we all maintain our sanity. And it's like, I think that's why everybody has to have some kind of hobby. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be collecting baseball cards or reading books or watching movies, but something that makes you happy and you kind of get to that place where and your mind is off your day-to-day problems, because I think your brain has to turn off for part of the day. Otherwise you either go crazy or you just burn yourself out.
Yeah, and these are all. This is why I ask that question, because your view, your experience, it's not about being right. It's not about being wrong. It's about offering this perspective and these insights that might get somebody thinking. That's all I really want anybody to get from this, is like, oh, I can share something that I kind of believe and what I try to practice, and then somebody, it might resonate with them. And it just has to be one person. I think all of these things are so great to talk about because one, I say this every time on the podcast too, is that critical thinking is on the endangered species list.
Yeah, no doubt.
And we need these stories, these anecdotes, these experiences so that we can curate that knowledge. We talked about it earlier where, a lot of people call it the silver tsunami. I'm in my 50s and I've got some knowledge, but you've got knowledge that people need. So now we have an episode that's going to have some of that, and on like this. I think stories are incredible. They're valuable. I love when people make time for it. But when we look at things like work-life balance, it might be a thing, it might not be a thing, different strokes for different folks. Work hard, play hard, all good. It's just to get people thinking. And that whole idea around critical thinking is, if common sense is actually very uncommon, then we need to do something to grab one or two people here and there and get them thinking. That's all.
Yeah.
What else can we do? You can't do
Yeah.
anything else. And well, look, first of all, I'm so
Before you
stoked
leave
you're
that, just one thing I think
yeah.
for everybody is take care of your health. It's like if you don't have your health, you don't have anything, and it's we all take it for granted. And when we're younger, um, we don't really have to, right? Your body's just what it is. But as we get older, it is important, and so do take care of health, eat right, get the sleep that you need, exercise, even if it's walking around the block. You don't have to go out and pump iron and lift weights, but take care of your health, because man, if you don't have that, nothing else in your life is going to matter.
Not a chance. Not a chance. So for everyone out there, you can find Wickham Zimmerman on LinkedIn. That's Wickham, and it's Zimmerman, Zimmerman. And please check out OTL. That's Outside the Lines Inc. They are at www.OTL-Inc.com. And I'm going to get some information, later on from Wick so that I can put up a little info about some of those other cool things we talked about with nonprofits and so forth. Wick, thank you for joining me on CMMS Radio.
Thanks for having me, Greg. It's always great talking to you. I mean, that has been super enjoyable for me. So it was a lot of fun, and talk to your ear off. Sorry about that, but always good. Always good. I appreciate it.
I love it, man. This was a blast. Stay with me for a second. Yeah.
All right.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.